Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Gigabit Wireless Networks for Education Campuses webinar. We are joined by Sakita Med, Cambium's General Manager of ePMP and C&Vision Business, Bruce Miller, our VP of Enterprise Marketing, and also Jonathan Kidwell, our Senior Director of Education Sales. Also on the line with us is John Percunier, the Vice President of eVergent. Before we begin, I want to quickly remind everyone to please ask any questions you have in the questions tab on the control panel during the presentation, as we will be having a Q&A at the end of today's session. But without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Bruce.
Great, thank you, Riley, and thank you everyone for joining today. So actually 2 weeks ago, we had a webinar in our series of education webinars where we talked about wireless, indoors primarily, Wi-Fi connectivity, and had a guest speaker at that event. We're following up today with a webinar that focuses on creating a campus network of wireless connectivity, primarily in outdoor locations, connecting buildings and sites, etc., and reaching out, in fact, extending that to the community. So different ideas and use cases we're going to be talking about today. We're joined by several folks from the Cambium staff, as well as John Percunier from eVergent, one of our partners. So I think this will be a good session to kind of cover a broader range of some of the solutions that we have for campus-based connectivity from a wireless perspective, the significant savings you can realize from these, and then how these all really come together into a single fabric from that perspective. So quick look at the agenda here. We'll do a quick introduction, then I'll hand it over to Saki to talk through some of these solutions, and then we'll pass it over to John. And then again, anytime during the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box. Also, there are some handouts. So in your little console there's a little paper icon you can click and download a few items, including this presentation and a few data sheets about the products we're talking about today. So just to kick off, again, following up on some of the webinars we've had in the past, I just wanted to make a plug here for following up with that. If you did not join the Cambium Connections event a few weeks back, there's some very good content there, all packaged up into videos that are up on YouTube. But we talked about technology, looking ahead, what's coming down the road from a wireless perspective, discussions with our CEO, Atul Bhatnagar, who you see there. You see some of the topics covering 6 gigahertz, new spectrum that's opening up, 60 gigahertz, very exciting new solutions from Cambium with multi-gig capabilities. Quality of experience, that was a presentation Saki delivered. We also had a guest speaker from Qualcomm as well, and some other sessions and Q&A. So those replays are up on YouTube, so check them out if you have not seen that. It's a very good event, I think, to kind of show you where Cambium is at, where we're looking ahead for 2021 and beyond. And then I alluded to this webinar here, it was 2 weeks ago, and that's also up on YouTube. So if you didn't miss that one, we had a guest speaker, Dr. Melanie Honeycutt from Burke Schools in North Carolina, one of our customers, and she spoke through some of the solutions that she's deployed, a very large network there. And so you can also catch that replay up on YouTube. And also just subscribe to the Cambium YouTube channel, lots of videos, hundreds and hundreds of videos up there where you can get more information about specific solutions or technologies as we discussed. All right, I'm going to pass over to Jonathan Kidwell here for a bit. There was just new news yesterday that the FCC announced, and wanted to just give you a quick rundown. This is a U.S.-specific discussion about some new funding available. So, Jonathan, you want to talk this through?
Absolutely, appreciate it, Bruce. So, like Bruce said, yesterday there was an announcement of the request for comments on administrating a brand new funding source in the United States called the Homework Gap of $7.1 billion. And really what that is focused on is pandemic related, the fact that schools are still closed in a lot of places or are starting to open, but doing, kind of a hybrid learning model, and really seeing the need for access to the students' learning environment, expanding the learning environment outside the cinder block walls, as we talk about. And so it just came out. They're looking for comment. If you're a school in the U.S. or even a partner, I would highly encourage you to read. We put the link in here for the actual FCC document. It discusses about providing access to the home, providing access mobility in the community around where the libraries are, who are also, struggling with being closed right now because of the pandemic, and being able to offer the alternate connections there. And so just wanted to bring that up. I know it is US based only, but one of the other things is we look at and we look at the campus connectivity, the CARES Act funds in the US, but then across the globe, every country having, is really not just scrambling, but actually executing on a lot of different funding capabilities to be able to provide that access of the campus and extend that connectivity and that learning environment outside of the campus environment. And really, as Sakid and John talk about their solutions that we've implemented and we offer, and the wide array of that, just be thinking about that, but also know that you don't have to look at all the ways of the traditional funding aspects and elements when it comes to that. There's a tremendous amount of opportunities for schools and universities to expand their campus environment outside that breadth with other funding opportunities. So I just wanted to highlight that, and I know it is US only, but we see them across the globe, and so this is a brand new one I wanted to highlight. And with that, Sakid, I'll turn it over to you and really talk about some of the capabilities that we offer.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks, Bruce, earlier. But welcome to everyone on this webinar. While we want to talk about wireless fabric, I want to set the stage a little bit from Cambium perspective. I mean, we're all kind of living through a very challenging time, and hopefully the light is at the end of the tunnel. But I live in the city of Chicago, and a block from me is a Pulaski International School. I can walk there, and hopefully my young kids will go there one day. But I see the schools closed, right? There's nothing going on there, and now they're starting that hybrid model. But students are coming from 2-3 miles west of here that I know for a certain fact that the AT&Ts and the Comcast are not providing broadband services. They're still struggling with a 3 megabit per second DSL line. So this gap in internet connectivity and the availability, I mean, it is so pronounced today, given the pandemic. And I'm really excited that John Precunier is here. He can share some insight, how the education entity, how you guys can empower yourselves to really connect the students. And this e-learning stuff is probably here to stay. And you guys are obviously experts at this more than us, but chances are there's going to be some hybrid model going forward for a long term. So broadband has become essential, and it's no longer about just Wi-Fi inside your school or jumping to the large telco bandwagon, paying recurring fees and all of that. We have to get innovative and creative and how to expand the connectivity options to the people who need it. So fortunately, Cambium, we talk about wireless fabric. This is absolutely the right time and the right place for a company like ourselves to showcase all the options we can give you. And Bruce will kind of jump to these slides pretty quickly, but fundamentally, we have numerous options, point to point, right? You want to build a link all by yourself, easy to do, different price ranges, different throughput, different requirements, but point to point is a very key component for site-to-site connection. And I'll give you a little bit more detail on specific use cases. As you expand on the wireless fabric, think also in point-to-multipoint, hub and spoke, right? Go back to your IT days and think about it from that perspective. But if you wanted to expand connectivity to residences and things like that, we have solutions across the board. Whether you think about building a CBRS system, which is a 3.5 gig spectrum, LTE system, a proprietary system using frequency that we have, phenomenal breadth of options from Cambium. Next slide, please, Bruce. And last but not least, the edge access, because while we are offering that proprietary connectivity that makes that connection very resilient wirelessly and cheap, because you're not paying that LTE SIM card fees to a carrier, at the end of the day, that tablet and that iPhone and that Android phone has to talk to Wi-Fi. So edge access, right? I mean, Bruce and Jonathan are very close to this space, so they can probably tell me stories, but I've read articles about students going and sitting by the Starbucks trying to get Wi-Fi access, right, to do their homework. So that's where outdoor Wi-Fi, right, the campus environment, local community gathering places, putting Wi-Fi there so that people can connect into the system, controlling the traffic, all of that makes a big sense. The next slide Bruce just went to is essentially, sorry, go ahead, Bruce, please.
Sorry, just interrupt real quick, just to talk a little bit about that. Last week's, or I'm sorry, 2 weeks ago, the webinar did talk about a lot of those use cases that Sakid mentioned, is expanding wireless connectivity. We've seen this from a lot of our customers in moving to outdoor locations, parking lots, mobile hotspots with buses or otherwise, to get wireless Wi-Fi connectivity out, to further reaches as well. So that discussion covered a lot of those, and we'll kind of carry forward today to talk then about those first two areas that Sakid mentioned, in terms of covering the campus in outdoor areas as well. So, some surveys that we've done has shown that, over half of our customers are expanding their coverage because they do have new use cases developing specifically because of what's happened over the last year. And so that's one of the things we want to explore in more detail today, and then ultimately pull this all together.
Right. There was an interesting question that popped up because we're trying to make this a little bit interactive about open access networks, not proprietary. I want to make a very clear distinction. At the end of the day, you are providing open access with everything we're offering. So when you look at all this product portfolio, look right down the middle where it says Wi-Fi. That is an open standard. Every device will connect to that. So at the end of the day, you are providing open access, and that's what you're basing your funding request for. The things that enable that connectivity, where your choices are today to use fiber or copper or trench the ground, that's where we come in with all of our other solutions. So that's a question that popped up. I thought it was relevant, so I wanted to touch on that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Bruce. Let's move ahead to the next slide. Right. This is a bit about the management side of things, very important aspect, because we can talk about radios, hardware, access and all of that, but at the end of the day, the management of the systems, the deployment, how easy is it to troubleshoot, the network planning, all of that comes together. So at Cambium, we're offering a compelling suite of solutions, whether it's the networking tool with Swift or CN Maestro or XMS and EasyPass, and tons of information that Bruce, Jonathan can share on each of these, but we just wanted to highlight and showcase that management is a key component of the entire story. All right, so let's, and that's good that somebody asked about use cases. So the graphics could be a little better, but hopefully we can convey this. This looks like a school campus, but one of the simple use cases, you're looking to extend broadband to a within the campus from a building to building. Today, your options may be that you're going to AT&T and doing a lease line or running copper or fiber, right? One of the easiest things we offer is a bridge in a box, right? You for a 500-foot connection to even longer than that, being able to take a couple of radios out of the box, power them up, point and click, and getting that 300-400 megabits across that parking lot, across that field to connect up two buildings is a very, very easy solution. So as part of the bigger story, this is a simple part of that, which is this bridge in a box, 3 different models, less than 5 minutes to install, right? You can do the physical installation, but then actual connection is very, very quick. It's all self-configured. For as little as $600 to $1,200 per link, based on a little bit of range, ruggedization, you can have an alternate path from fiber or copper. So point and connect, very, very powerful and simple solution for a building-to-building connectivity. And with that, we'll go to the next use case, which is think in terms of a point-to-multipoint. We talked about hub and spoke. Your stadiums and school play areas are starting to get people back. You have a need for video surveillance expansion. You have a need for providing outdoor Wi-Fi. You can build a point-to-multipoint network that you own, that you maintain, and you are going to cut significantly the infrastructure costs going wireless. And on the next slide, we show a unique product that we just launched.
Hold on, one quick question, one quick statement on that. Excuse me. Bruce, if you go back to that other slide, one of the things that we've seen across a lot of the universities and primary schools also is the ball fields, like Ski was talking about, where we do have to have the social distancing, and in some places we can't even have attendees attend the games, but they want to live stream those games. And so it's not just about putting a Wi-Fi outdoor access point and backhauling it on one of the radios and trying to offer that up. Really this point to multipoint in extending in your campus. If I've got 5 or 6 ball fields in in an area that I want to shoot to the press box and all those, and then run that high def video stream, that I can guarantee that quality of experience for my parents and coaches and recruits remotely. This gives me that with the assurance of a quality of service and a level, a higher standard of delivery of that video. And so we're seeing that as one of the just massive amount of schools wanting to bring that on, because they're having the games. The students may be coming in and playing the games, but they want to be able to offer that video out to the community.
That's a great point, Jonathan, because I wouldn't have thought about the live streaming of games, but that makes a lot of sense as an application beyond just video surveillance or Wi-Fi. Great point. Great point.
And one more thing is I think we have seen also a number of temporary events. So some of these things can be just set up really quickly because you have, say, a graduation or maybe a sporting event. You don't need a permanent connection there. You're only using it a few times a year. Wireless can make a really good alternative for some kind of permanent link up, because you may have some things that you dynamically need to adjust to. So that's another use case that that lends itself well to this. Right,
and thanks for bringing that up, Bruce. Because one of the things we're not talking about here per se is that power will be your next challenge in some cases. A school campus tends to have power, but if you didn't have power and you wanted to do a temporary solution, Cambium can help you on that front too. We don't particularly sell a solar panel, charge controller, battery pack, but we have a pretty good idea on how to pull that together, and we can work with some of the integrator partners and providing solutions that you can power up this stuff, because most of this is very low power consumption devices that we build. So the product that I wanted to talk about in that scenario is essentially a pole mount switch, which is got a built-in radio. And what you see here is essentially the backside of that. And this is all part of a video surveillance purpose-built solution that can also be used for Wi-Fi backhaul, and as Jonathan Kilwell said, to connect a streaming device to it. But it's a 45-watt PoE budget out of those 3 ports. So you can plug in a 15-watt camera, outdoor Wi-Fi device, or for that matter, an IoT device. All that is managed through this portfolio of CNVision product line, which has some on-WIF integration, video management system integration. So if you're watching your video surveillance through a Genetec or a Milestone system or an access camera station, you can also get alarms and statistics from the backhaul. Hey, the link went down and I got an alarm on my VMS system. So as we talk about single management for the networking side of things, when you talk about cameras and stuff, you may be using VMS as your fundamental solution. So we're bringing the backhaul into that space. Bottom right-hand corner, you kind of see the portfolio. We can have a separate session on this, but I just want to highlight that a pole mount switch with an integrated radio and a 60-watt power supply with a 45-watt power budget out of 3 PoE ports, all of a sudden eliminates that need for a separate switch, separate backhaul connection, and brings the cost down and ease of use and failure points down to a smaller number of scenarios. So we're excited about this product, and I think it has a lot of application in the education space. We'll move ahead, and we wanted to throw this out there, and Bruce and I kind of talked about this, that look, if you ever thought that your only option for extending connectivity is to go to the big guys or try to trench fiber, wireless is absolutely a phenomenal economical solution. The numbers here are not in, we did this for another country, but this is really a sample ROI calculator. We'll update this for the US market, but the savings generally hold. And, I'm sure John has comments on this because he runs a massive network of hybrid fiber plus wireless. And he may comment on, I may actually ask you, John, and add that one of your questions to say, hey, what do you think about fiber versus wireless, and how do you offset the two or complement each other? So that's the idea behind the fiber versus wireless ROI. And with that, we'll move ahead to a few other case studies. Long distance point to point. Think about remote campus connectivity. We talked about building to building, but now let's say you do have a remote campus and it's 15 miles somewhere in the city or outskirts of the city. Again, a huge plethora of options. Licensed microwave. Bruce, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Licensed microwave, unlicensed spectrum, anything from 300 megabits all the way to greater than 2 gigabits per second, low latency, ruggedized solutions. You can go from very novice installation where it's plug and play and boom, your link is done and good to go. Or if you wanted to say, hey, I want the top of the line licensed microwave, nobody else is ever going to transmit on this, then you go to the bottom of that row. Do want to highlight that the middle product line is the millimeter wave stuff. Lots of excitement in the industry about this, getting a couple of gigabits of throughput on wireless. It's very clean spectrum, it's narrow beams, relatively short distance, but it packs a punch in terms of that fiber replacement. Then on the top of that, sorry, go ahead.
A question just came in about FCC. Do they need to have FCC certifications to deploy these wireless solutions?
Right. Good question, Jonathan. So technically, you have if you think about what your Wi-Fi stuff operates in, you don't go and ask the FCC for permission. So essentially, that entire 5 gigahertz band is a lot of spectrum that does not require any type of FCC certification. If you wanted to get a little more advanced, you could go and get a loosely licensed spectrum in 4.9 for public safety for certain applications. But more or less, no, you don't need FCC authorization or grants for a significant portion of the licenses we offer or the products we offer. There are things like CBRS band, which you may have heard about, 3.5. Licensed microwave, some of those cases it varies, but fundamentally we're giving you lots of flexibility in not requiring an FCC. Thanks, Jonathan. Good question. Moving ahead to the one of the more interesting parts of the presentation is, so this is another one. Sorry, before we move to the next one is, again, through the pandemic, we've also heard the challenge. Hey, let's put the school bus out there. Let's go to Verizon and pay for 20 MiFi devices and fire up those and get people Wi-Fi access while you backhaul with LTE. I think it works in an urgent situation, but really that recurring cost that you're paying for those MiFi devices and the data charges over time, that adds up, right? You have limited funding, you have limited budget, so that's a tough challenge. So our proposal here is, look, you don't have to go to the big guys. That same school bus could have a small mast, building has another mast. You can build a point-to-point link, use an outdoor Wi-Fi device and blast it into a housing area or a subdivision and whatnot, right? So that's another very, very relevant use case with the Cambium wireless fabric. And then the last one where we'll get pretty exciting. Sorry, there was also a question that popped up, and I'm trying to make this interactive and answering some of the questions about the V5000 data sheet provides 15.4 gigabits per aggregate throughput. That is correct, but that is essentially in a point-to-multipoint network. So if you have the V5000, if you have a 3000 and a 1000 node with channel bonding and whatnot, the amount of aggregate throughput you can get at that node, yes, it is as high as 15 gigabits per second. Okay, last but not least, point-to-multipoint network. Jonathan and I remember, Jonathan, it was a QBR at Cambium before we all went remote. We were brainstorming about this. As a school is paying for a very fat pipe coming into the building. Would you ever want to embark on the challenge of extending that fat pipe to the neighborhoods and run your own network, putting Wi-Fi so that people can work from home and study from home and you segregate the bandwidth? So it's a tall order because not too long ago we spoke to a Northern Illinois school district. As I was talking to the IT guys, they got excited, but we said, look, you want to build potentially a tower, you have to do some coverage maps and things like that. Some may want to venture into that because, again, you don't need any special licensing. The equipment is affordable, easy to use. You could go up and build your own point-to-point multipoint network. Or the other alternative where Cambium comes into play with our huge breadth of customers is, folks like John and his company, they partner up with the local government. They are becoming the arm for the local education entity or the local municipality and saying, okay, we'll take some of the funds and build a network for you. And that's something that I think has a lot of potential. As we talk about the other use cases, they're great, they solve some problems, but ultimately the broadband needs to get to the users in their residences, and they may be living 7 miles from school or 20 miles from school. How do you solve that problem? So with that, I would love to turn the mic over to John. And John, let's start with a little introduction. Tell us about yourself, tell us about the company, and let's kind of have a chat. And Bruce and Jonathan, please chime in anytime.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, first and foremost, great presentation. So much of the presentation and the slides resonates with me, not only in the education space, but just across all vertical markets. Education isn't the only one being challenged with today's environment with COVID-19 and, adapting and getting access to people. My name is John Procunior. I'm the Vice President over at Evergent. We're based in Racine County, Wisconsin, but we have offices in Illinois as well. Right now, we cover about 9 different counties in southeast Wisconsin and northern Illinois. We have a large residential practice. We have a large business practice. And we also are venturing into voice over IP services for our customers and building fiber networks as well. So we kind of have a couple different tentacles out there that are all good for us and seem to be a welcome addition to the product offering, and people are taking advantage of those services from us.
Thanks, John. So John, the question I wanted to discuss a little bit is like, in terms of the challenge that the pandemic has presented, right? The e-learning challenges and whatnot. What's your comments on that? What have you guys seen from your business perspective, whether it's the uptick in broadband requests or, what do you hear from your local market in terms of the challenges in education?
Yeah, so clearly there was people that needed upticks in bandwidth. The household is not just held accountable for e-learning anymore. It's also held accountable for the parents that have remote workforce and some of the other elements that are out there. So, bandwidth requirements at the house have, more than doubled in a short amount of time. Also, people that maybe didn't have residential internet before now were forced to go get residential internet access, and they subscribe for those services as well. I've even seen a couple instances where houses had multiple internet connections, so they were almost operating as a small business. I do my work on my Evergent connection, but my house has the local cable company or an AT&T or something like that, so my kids can view e-learning and that kind of thing, because I might have been having issues sharing that bandwidth with Zoom or whatever activities were going on behind the scenes, which also has led to an element of management of those applications. So you start getting past just the broadband and the internet into router and firewall, but application management becomes key for some of these people as well. But for e-learning specifically, the problem wasn't necessarily the residential users that had internet and needed more internet. That's an easy problem to solve. What do you do for the group of kids that are presumably on a hot lunch program or have some sort of assistance that, that's not a monthly bill that they have built into their budget and can't afford it? So that was the real problem that we were going out with the county and the different entities to try and solve right off the bat.
John, could you expand a little bit on that then? So what are you working on today? How did the county and the local government get involved with you? How did the WISP, local government and education, the 3 pieces come together? If you can share a little bit on that, that'd be great for the audience, I think.
Absolutely. It's funny because the one slide you had with the bus and doing LTE was the start of our conversation. I can't remember where in the country we got an article, but we had an article where they said, hey, these buses have hotspots in them and they can drive around neighborhoods and people can access the internet. The challenge for us was fixed wireless means fixed, right? Like, so it's not going to be driving up and down a street and broadcasting internet, and it's only the instance that that bus is in that general vicinity. And I think, Sakid, you alluded to it, a lot of times when you're buying packages from those cellular companies, it's not unlimited data. And at some point in time, the cost of those services becomes something that's daunting. So we had to be creative and think out of the box. So we got together with the county, and what we've identified was strategically across the county, different areas that were underserved, and built outdoor Wi-Fi hotspots. So kind of back to your campus environment, we would bring in an internet connection. Actually, it's not even an internet connection. We'd bring in a point-to-point connection to a building and then relay that to one of your access points. And instead of it being inside the building, it's pointing out to an area, generally speaking, a park area, a parking lot area, a grassy area, where we figured people could walk up, ride their bikes up, drive up in their cars, social distance, and get internet access. And that's to the masses. That's not just for the kids. That's to the adults seeking jobs and employments and submitting resumes and that kind of thing. And the part that gets to be interesting is we worked out with the county that point-to-point goes back to our data center, where in our data center, the county has equipment where they're actually having security around the network. So you can't go out to adult content websites, you can't go out to, gambling websites and that kind of stuff. So we've white and blacklist a lot of different things. So this open Wi-Fi isn't meant for recreational use, right? It's meant to suit the needs of the community and the people that don't have internet access. So it's a really unique situation. And now what we're doing is we're partnering with other entities, and a lot of those actually fall into nonprofit, because that's the entities that have a captive audience of people who can most benefit from this service. And we're putting the Wi-Fi units on those buildings, and people can access those from most of these nonprofits that we're partnering with.
And John, the funding on this is coming from where? Is it shared across multiple entities? How does that work?
Yeah. It's a little bit all over the board, right? Like some of it comes from grants. And I think when Bruce or Jonathan was talking earlier, there's lots of grants out there. They're not just specific to broadband in general. There are grants for lack of tourism and all kinds of different things. It's just allocating the money for the right resources or the right solutions. Some of it's been privately funded, right? Somebody sees what we're doing and hears what we're doing, and they're happy to write a check and sponsor a location or multiple locations. So it's a little bit of everything. If there's a lot of things that go on in your work environment, this is one of those projects that's kind of heartwarming because it resonates with so many people and they want to help out. So it's not just government funding or state funding, it's everything.
Gotcha. Great, thank you. Jonathan, Bruce, did you guys have any questions? I want to make sure we get some other questions in here, as well as the audience. Any questions for John that we can respond to?
Yeah, John, this is Bruce. If you could describe a little bit about maybe the anatomy of one of these scenarios. You mentioned a few use cases, but how quick and scalable is something like this to set up, just from a wireless perspective, so people in the audience can kind of get an idea of what a project entails and the level of effort related to that, to set up some of these scenarios that you were talking about.
Sure. As most of the audience probably knows, if they're familiar with Wi-Fi and fixed wireless, the biggest hurdle is line of sight. So making sure that we have line of sight to whatever location that we're doing, solved with a simple site survey. Generally speaking, we go out, do that site survey. Within a couple of days, I can have a network up and running for that location, provided we have line of sight. And whoever owns that location is okay with granting us roof rights and access, letting us do the cable or doing the cable themselves, and then giving us some sort of access to power. Sakid talked about power. we could do a standard plug or we could do PoE. So it doesn't really matter to us, but whatever is best suited for them. And the cool thing about the solution is for that end user who's granting us rights to the building, this isn't interfering with their network or taking away broadband that they use for their business. This is in addition to. So it's a separate, totally diverse network for them that doesn't impede on what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think just to
The
add
timing
on,
is pretty quick. I think that's
Yeah.
the main point, right? Is you can get these things going very quick and easy based on just the nature of wireless, relative to perhaps some other things that people are used to using. So, sorry, go ahead, John.
For sure, Dave.
I was just saying to add on to that, we've seen a lot of schools, have great partnership, with the municipalities, and when you start looking at the assets that you're looking for with line of sight, being able to partner with your local, city and county municipalities around, being able a lot of times from the school to shoot to a water tower, and then from there be able to shoot down into a lot of different parks and access, and and having that line of sight, or to a large building, or that the city may own, or like you were saying, John, that even somebody who wants to partner, you're not going to find anybody who doesn't want to partner with the educational environment in their community to help out. Then it just becomes, you're looking for those assets. And in the past, those assets, it's all about height, and it's all about line of sight and visibility, of course. But those assets, you'll start to see the communities joining together. And so it's not just the school's network or the university's network. It's being able to leverage all the assets across the community to extend your campus out.
Schools make a lot of sense for a variety of different reasons, right? It's not just the e-learning element of those things, but they generally do have, large grassy areas, big parking lots, picnic tables outside, that kind of stuff. So social distancing becomes easy. But also from a geography standpoint, if you think about, I don't care what community you live in the United States, those schools are set up strategically so you don't have to bus people all the way across town and that kind of stuff. So access to schools becomes very easy for the residential community, right? Most of them
Right.
can walk or drive within a reasonable amount of time to get to one of those buildings, and then the access is there for them.
Yeah, and then you were talking about the Zoom session to the home, and some of the things that Cambium's done. Being able to prioritize certain applications that are the most important applications to, because a teacher, a professor may have to go into the building to do the Zoom session. In a hybrid learning environment, you may have only a third of those students in the classroom, and then you may have 2/3 of those students at home, and being able to ensure that quality of service for applications, not just on your Wi-Fi network, but on your point-to-point links and across the complete fabric of the network is critical to that success. When it comes to that. And then, also when you start thinking about, in the United States, it's called SIPA compliance, but it's ensuring that, the filtered internet for the students. And so things like what we have with our Easy Pass and our management capabilities, being able to say, this is a district, school owned device, and this is, and we're going to make sure that it goes through the correct filtering services. And then if it's not, if it's, John, like you're talking about in your home, you're doing work from home. And so if you're using that same internet link in your home, you can go out a different path to the internet, so that the students are using the school's filtered link, have access to the resources they're supposed to have, and they know that they're safe and connected. But then even on that same link, if it's not a district-owned machine and not a student, you could dump them out to a different internet connection. And preserve that internet bandwidth for educational purposes.
You couldn't be more right. Preservation of that connection becomes paramount. Before the COVID-19, people were just adding elements to their network without even realizing it. I mean, think about your home specifically. You might have, Ring doorbell service. You have how many kids with iPhones and iPads and your computers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it would be nothing to have 15 different devices hooked up to the internet for a family of 4. You know, so even realizing what's going out to the internet and when you're trying to access it, how to manage those devices and shut them down or ratchet them back or give priority to what's important at a certain time during the day is paramount to the success of these networks, you know, and the performance of them. I would also tell you that, you know, another slide that you had was the video capabilities that you guys offer. When you start inviting the public out to parking lots or, you know, these areas that you weren't inviting them to before now where they have Wi-Fi access, security becomes important. So hooking up cameras and being able to offer some sort of security platform becomes very important as well. People want to know that when their kids are riding their bikes or walking up to the playground and accessing the internet, that, you know, unscrupulous people aren't accessing those parking lots as well too. So monitoring those areas becomes critical, and having a out-of-the-box deployment that includes video cameras and surveillance is huge.
It's a great point, John. Thank you. John, one other question we kind of highlighted was the fiber ROI question.
Yeah.
Share some thoughts on that front. I know you guys are a hybrid operation. How would you address that?
Yeah, your slide was spot on. I had a guy in Western Illinois who was a farm, and you know, they needed high-speed bandwidth, and they went out to the incumbent, you know, big company. I won't use any kind of names on our webinar, but the big company, and it was over $600,000 to trench fiber out there.
Wow.
When you start talking about trenching fiber, especially in the rural communities, you know, when you build a fiber network, you talk about passes. How many homes, how many businesses do you pass on this fiber network to get to the end user customer that's willing to pay for that build, right? And if there's hundreds of buildings in between point A and Z, that build becomes more and more economical, because the thought process is you can get, you know, a third of them, half of them, 2/3 of them signed up. In the rural community, there's nothing between A and Z. So, you know, rule of thumb, you're talking about $85,000 a mile for fiber, you know, and you're passing that on to whoever that end user Z location is, and that gets to be exponentially expensive. So with today's modern technology on the fixed wireless, a lot of that becomes a hybrid model. I can build out a fiber network to this community that has density of homes and businesses and that kind of stuff, and it's economical. But when I start going out wider to that second and tertiary ring in their community, I need some other form of delivery. You know, and people ask me all the time, John, what's the right solution for my city, municipality, township, whatever? And my pat answer is, you need everything, right? You need the cable companies, you need the AT&Ts or the ILEX of the world or the CLEX of the world. You need a fixed wireless company. You need cellular companies, and you may even need a satellite company or two to get to some of those people. So, you know, when you're solving the problem of I need broadband for my constituency, the members of my community, it really takes a village to do that.
Great commentary on that.
Yeah, you alluded to other technologies there. There's a question that actually came in about Starlink. Any comments on you know, that kind of technology and its place as well moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, time and a place for everything, right? I haven't seen a bunch of people migrate from my network to Starlink. I have a cottage in northern Wisconsin that has no access to internet, no cellular, no fixed wireless, no cable company, no phone company, that kind of stuff. And I tried to subscribe to Starlink. It's not available in that geography right now, and I'm on a waiting list and all that kind of stuff. I mean, time will tell, right? I think that I'm glad that somebody else is investing in other technologies. I hope that because it's a lower orbit around the Earth, that the latency is better than what you see through some of the other satellite carriers, and it's more usable. You know, time will tell. You know, I don't think there's enough customers on it, and there's enough response to give you a valid answer. I think it's good. And I think that if you can access it, it's probably going to serve your purpose. My guess is if you're going out trying to find Starlink, you've already exhausted, I can't get cable, I can't get the big phone company, I can't get fixed wireless. So you're probably between a rock and a hard place. And at that stage in the game, anything's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Another question just came in about, you know, how do the total cost of ownership beyond the pandemic, and that's definitely something we continue to get, questions and concerns around, especially with things like the Wi-Fi hotspots. Those have a monthly charge to them and those type of things, and and one of the things we're always focused on is trying to provide, that lower total cost of ownership and that ROI to support. And, when schools are looking at extending their campus, there's lots of different options, as John was saying, that you want to, partnerships and those things, because you don't necessarily want to become the ISP. And what happens if a student moves into a neighborhood or moves out of a neighborhood, and, and the gear supporting that. So really what you're trying to do is reduce the number of students. The national statistic is just under 20% of all students across the United States don't have access to high-speed broadband at home. And so, maybe that, like you're saying, John, you've exhausted everything, and Starlink is your only option in some places. But if a school, university can reduce that from 18, 20%. And Melanie talked a lot about this last 2 weeks ago on the webinar, but the goal is to reduce that percentage down, right? And identify your success statement, but then also not to have that long-term cost and that reoccurring cost. And I think that a lot of schools are struggling with, okay, if I put a Wi-Fi hotspot in every kid's hand, I can't afford that when these fundings go, when the pandemic money goes away. And so I've got to make sure that I have a sustainable solution. And that's really where the fixed wireless and owning that gear and making sure that you're planning to support that gear long term becomes way more financially responsible to a district.
No doubt about it. I mean, if you're trying to expand that network with fiber, Sakid said he's in Chicago, and he's talking about kids in his community in that particular school that's blocks away. That school is surrounded by streets and railroad tracks and all kinds of other things. When you're trenching fiber and you go across streets and highways and railroad tracks and that kind of stuff, I mean, you're tacking on tens of thousands of dollars every time you add that element, where in your solution for the pictures of these campus environments, you can strap up these wireless networks and these radio heads for a fraction of the cost and get the same performance, potentially even better, depending on where that fiber assets go and how it gets back to the main hub. I mean, I've got how
distributed it is, right, John? Along the way, right, you're sharing that fiber bandwidth, right? It's not just multiple point to points, right? So that's one thing. John, sorry to expand on a little bit on that question, though. I just saw it come across. So when the pandemic ends, what's going to happen to those Wi-Fi hotspots that you guys are putting out in the public areas? Keep them running?
Yeah, the idea is to keep them running. Before, who just asked the last? Was it Jonathan talking before? And he was talking about statistics for the national average. If you dig deeper and start peeling that onion back, that number becomes a little bit more, I don't know what the right word would be, eye-opening or astounding. It's not that they just don't have internet. The community that you're talking about basically is ethnic minorities and people living in poverty. So I don't care if there's a pandemic or not. That whole element's not going to change. And I have something in front of me. We did this for a single county, and this particular county had 12,000 households that lacked internet access, right? 72% of that was ethnic minorities. 28% of that was people living in poverty. How does that change when COVID goes away?
Right. Well, it doesn't, and that's a great point, because it's that 20% is they don't have access to it. And there's two things. One, it could be physical access, or they can't afford it. And so there's a lot of places that don't have that internet access to their home that AT&T can provide a link, or somebody else could provide a link, but they can't afford it. And so this allows, this type of solution allows a school to provide that to that educational environment to the home without having to have that cost burden on the parents or the people in that home.
No doubt about it. The pandemic has put a greater reliance on internet access than we've ever had. Doesn't matter how you get the internet access, but if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to function in society going forward. We're talking specifically about schools, but think about things like telemedicine. How are you going to go see a doctor via the internet if you don't have access to it? I sit on multiple boards for school districts. All of those school districts have job postings online. What's the TV commercials you see now? Indeed, and some of these other companies. How do you submit your resume? How do you even know the job exists? Most of these people don't get I don't get a newspaper anymore. Who gets newspapers anymore?
Right.
So how are you going to be aware that there's even a job available for you? How are you going to submit your resume to Indeed or to their website or to whatever the application is that resides out in the cloud to do that?
Great point.
It's critical to have internet access, period.
Absolutely.
Great.
There's a couple other questions here that came in. John, what speed are you seeing in the edge networks that you're talking about, that you're setting up?
Right. So we're setting it up. I'm sorry. What was the second part?
Well, yeah, that basically, what kind of service level are you able to deliver with these kind of networks?
I mean, we can really deliver almost anything that we want. The network has the ability to grow. The initial installs that we're doing are 25 by 5. We want to be at or above whatever the government standards are for internet access. And one of the things that we can do is monitor the traffic at any one of the locations. And if we see one of the locations having a higher demand for more bandwidth, it's a computer program, as you know, you outlined it in your equipment. I can go in and change that to 35 by 10, 45 by 10, 65 by 15. Doesn't really matter. As long as the bandwidth is there, that radio has the ability to do a lot more capacity, and that change is very, very easy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Let's see, I wanted to make sure we get to all the questions here. There was one from quite a bit earlier related to deploying Wi-Fi 6 or waiting till 6E. This was related to the 6 gigahertz topic that we talked about before. And so I can speak to that briefly based on Cambium's plans. And we talked about this at the webinar series a couple of weeks ago, Cambium Connections. 6 gigahertz is a new band that's opened up, and there'll be products. Well, there's actually already products out there in the consumer market. And we have products rolling out later this year. As to, do you deploy now or wait? I mean, it depends on your use case. There's, triple the amount of spectrum opening up with Wi-Fi 6E. So we certainly have customers in venues and high density spaces that are just, grappling for more spectrum. So that's a good use case there. I would say, though, for the majority of our educational customers and, corporate customers, the current technology is fine. It just really depends on when your buying cycles are and where you're going. But I think it's certainly a major, element for Wi-Fi. And then these technologies will extend further into some of the different solutions we talked about today, the EP&P product line and otherwise, where new spectrum, it's always a good thing. It opens up more possibilities, more bandwidth, and cleaner areas to communicate in, that are getting congested more and more in the current spaces. We see that a lot where, even in the 5 gigahertz spectrum, there's lots of competing solutions out there, and networks are getting busier and busier and noisier and noisier because of it. So I think it all depends on the use case that you have would be the answer to the question. But certainly you can deploy the technology today with a lot of success if your timing so dictates.
Bruce, two
All
other
right.
comments, I think. The second one was a good one, but I wanted to highlight something. So to the audience, Bruce, I think in general, folks like John, longtime Cambium customers doing some clever, innovative stuff. But the truth is Cambium has, many Johns that are doing WISP work in different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we as a company can connect the school districts, which you bring to the table with our Xeris line and the XV line and whatnot, and the WISP business that we built up traditionally. So we could offer that, right, to the audience here that, look, if you don't know who is your operator in your local region, come and ask Cambium. We'll make the connection. I think that's definitely an offer from our side that we can help. And the second thing is, like, somebody had a good question that they left already, but about setting up a Tiger team that features Cambium in helping funding these applications. As John talked, I mean, I realize, John, I hear the passion in your commentary, right? You're not just running a business. You're looking at the social problem here, and you're really saying, hey, this is a heck of an opportunity. Maybe the pandemic opened our eyes to it, but it's been there all along, right? So as a company, Cambium, as you know, we're very interested in bridging the digital divide. So I can almost envision, us, you, a few other folks like yourself from the industry. We build our own little Tiger team, and maybe we start an initiative that helps across the country and globally how to connect these things. Getting a little, far out there, but I think that's something we should really think about, and that's more for Bruce and Jonathan and myself to champion and bring you in.
You're right. I mean, we built these networks without our cost built into it, right? Like if I was building all those locations for a business account, the price points would have been way different. We're doing it at a separate price point and sharing some of the financial responsibility for building the network. And that's why you're seeing so many people get behind it, right? It's not just a grant, again, from the state or from the government. It's local businesses and people who understand that of the people in their community that don't have internet, like I said, 72% of them are minorities, 28% of them are living in poverty. It's not changing after COVID goes away, and they want to get behind that. Those same business owners need employees, by the way, and they need to be able to broadcast that they have jobs out there and what those jobs are. So they get the joke. You just need to be able to lay it all out to them and tell them what the story is.
Right. Great point. Thank you, John. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we've come to the top of the hour, so I think we'll wrap it up here. But yeah, just to follow up there, Sakid, with your comment, I mean, certainly Cambium can make a lot of those introductions to partners like eVirgin and John that we work with as Cambium. And I know that, talking to a lot of our customers, coming over from Xeris or otherwise in education, we're making those types of introductions on a regular basis because the need is there, and we're finding creative ways to solve, the problems that we're encountering. So we will wrap it up at this point. I want to thank everyone for joining today. Again, a copy of the presentation is in the handout section. So Riley, if you can leave this going for a minute or two afterward, just so people can download, and then we'll also make available the recording as well. But thanks to John and everyone for joining today, and we'll be talking to you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Bye-bye.